The crew knows the procedure by instinct. Approach at 200 feet. Speed 200 mph, heading directly at the entrance. Release at 300 yards on Chen's mark. Pull up hard immediately, pray the flak misses. Thornton watches one of the practice runs. Afterward, he pulls Walker aside. "I've been thinking about this," Thornton says. "If you succeed, if you actually put a bomb inside one of those pens, the Germans will realize what we've done. They'll fortify the entrances. They'll add barriers, steel nets, obstacles. You'll get one chance, maybe two. Then the tactic becomes useless." "I know," Walker says. "So you're volunteering to die for what might be two successful attacks?" "No, sir. I'm volunteering to prove that the fortress isn't a fortress. It's a building with a door, and we've been too scared to walk through it." Thornton nods slowly. "When do you want to go?" "March 14th. Weather forecast shows clear skies over Brest, and intelligence reports 3 U-boats scheduled for provisioning. The doors will be open." The attack, March 14th, 1943, 06:45 hours. RAF Molesworth, England. Walker's B-17, nicknamed Aluminum Overcast, lifts off into a grey dawn. The weather forecast was optimistic. It's overcast, not clear, but visibility is adequate. They fly alone. This isn't a formation attack. This is precision work. The flight across the English Channel takes 40 minutes. Walker flies at 8,000 feet, high enough to avoid small arms fire from German positions, but low enough to stay under the coastal radar. Navigator Mills provides constant position updates. They're heading to Brest on a course that will bring them over the target from the northwest, approaching the pen entrances from the ocean side. At 07:20 they cross the French coast. Mills confirms, target in 12 minutes. Walker begins his descent. From 8,000 feet to 200 feet in 12 minutes requires careful management. Descend too fast, the airframe stress increases. Descend too slow, they're vulnerable for longer. Walker calculates a descent rate of 650 feet per minute, which he can achieve at current power settings without stressing the engines. The coastline passes beneath them. Brest appears ahead, the harbor identifiable by the concentration of German ships. And there, on the harbor's edge, the massive grey rectangles of the Karaman pens. "Target visual," Chen reports from the bombardier's position. "Acknowledged," Walker replies. Beginning attack run. He drops to 500 feet, then 300 feet, then 200 feet. The altimeter becomes critical now. Too low, they hit the water. Too high, the bomb trajectory changes. The B-17 thunders across the wave tops, spray occasionally hitting the underside of the fuselage. The coastal batteries open fire. Eddy-diminy shells burst around them, black puffs of smoke and shrapnel. The German gunners are good, but they're tracking a target doing 200 miles per hour at 200 feet, and that's a difficult firing solution. Most shells burst behind the B-17 or above it. But some get close. A burst to starboard. Metal fragments pepper the right wing. Another burst ahead. Walker flies through the smoke. The aircraft shudders. Warning lights illuminate on the panel. Number 3 engine shows reduced power. They're hit, but they're still flying. 2 minutes to release, Chen calls. The pen entrance is ahead now, clearly visible. It's enormous, a rectangular opening, perhaps 60 feet wide and 40 feet high. The darkness inside absolute. Steel doors are retracted, just as intelligence predicted. Walker can see activity inside. Small figures moving. Equipment, submarines. 1 minute. The anti-aircraft fire intensifies. The Germans realize something unusual is happening. A B-17 at 200 feet approaching the pens directly isn't normal. Tracers arc toward them, yellow and red streams. Walker hears impacts, metal hitting metal. Something sparks in the cockpit. Harold gasps, but keeps his hands on the controls. 30 seconds. Walker can see individual German soldiers now. Men at gun positions. Men running. The details are crisp, immediate, terrifying. He forces himself to maintain speed, maintain altitude. The slightest deviation means a miss. 15 seconds. I have the target. The entrance fills their entire view. It's like flying into a cave, except the cave has guns and the guns are firing. Orange muzzle flashes from the pen entrance. Machine gun fire. The windscreen cracks. Something ricochets inside the cockpit. 5 seconds. Chen is counting down. His hand is on the release. The U-boats inside are visible now, dark shapes in the dim interior. 3, 2, 1. Release. The B-17 lurches upward as 2,000 pounds drops away. Walker pulls back on the controls immediately. Full power, climbing, turning, evading. The nose lifts. The ocean falls away. The pen entrance passes below them, close enough to see individual stones in the concrete. Behind them, the bomb hits the water. Skip, skip again. Then it disappears into the entrance. For 3 seconds, nothing. Walker is at 400 feet, turning hard to port, clearing the area. He sees the pen behind them, sees the darkness of the entrance. Then light. The explosion is white, brilliant, a flash that seems to expand in slow motion. But this isn't an external detonation. This is internal. The light comes from inside the pen, blasting outward through the entrance. The pressure wave follows, a visible distortion in the air. Then smoke black and thick pouring from the opening. The blast wave hits the B-17 like a physical object. The aircraft is thrown sideways, controls suddenly loose. Walker fights it, regains authority, levels out at 600 feet. He looks back. The pen entrance is obscured by smoke, but the smoke is coming from inside. Deep inside, the explosion detonated within the structure exactly as calculated. The roof contained the blast, amplified it, turned the pen into a pressure chamber. "Did we hit?" Harrell asks, his voice shaking. "We hit," Walker replies. They climb to 2,000 feet and circle once. Through breaks in the smoke, reconnaissance photographs later confirm what they see. Debris floating in the water inside the pen. Oil spreading and something else, a submarine. U-4421, listing heavily to port, clearly damaged. They've done it. They've put a bomb inside the fortress. The flight back to England is tense. Number 3 engine is failing, held together by Prayers and Garcia's expert management. The hydraulic system is damaged. They'll have landing gear issues. The right wing has shrapnel damage, but they're alive and they're flying. They land at RAF Molesworth at a 9:15 hours. As the aircraft rolls to a stop, Walker and his crew can see the ground crew staring at the damage. The B-17 looks like it flew through a wall of bullets, which in a sense it did. Colonel Thornton meets them at the aircraft. "Did you get it?" he asks. Walker, climbing down from the cockpit, nods. 1 bomb, 1 pen, 1 U-boat. The calculations worked. Thornton looks at the bomber, looks at the crew, looks back at Walker. "Do you know what you've just done?" "Yes, sir. We've proven the pens aren't invulnerable." "No, Captain. You've just written a new chapter in bombing doctrine. And you're about to be very famous or very dead, because now you have to do it again." Resistance and validation. The intelligence photographs arrive at 8th Air Force Headquarters on March 16th. They show extensive damage inside the Karaman 3 pen. U-441 heavily damaged, structural debris, apparent casualties. The photographs are immediately classified and distributed to a small circle of senior officers. The initial reaction is skepticism. Brigadier General Frederick Anderson, reviewing the mission report, writes, "The described tactics represent an unacceptable risk to crew and aircraft. While this single success is noteworthy, it does not establish viability as a repeatable methodology. The loss rate for such attacks would be prohibitive." Translation: Impressive, but we're not doing it again. General Ira Eaker, commanding the 8th Air Force, is more cautious. He reads Walker's technical analysis, studies the photographs, consults with his staff. His assessment, dated March 18th. Captain Walker's attack demonstrates creative thinking applied to a previously unsolved problem. However, the tactic's dependence on precise conditions, open doors, calm seas, experienced crew, limits its applicability. Recommend further study before operational implementation. Translation: Interesting, but prove it works more than once. Walker, newly promoted to captain, receives orders to brief the technique to other bomber groups. He travels to air bases across England, explaining the physics, demonstrating the calculations, answering questions. The questions are pointed. What's the survival rate? What happens if the doors are closed? What's the hit probability against heavy flak? How do you prevent the blast from destroying the attacking aircraft? Walker answers honestly. The survival rate is uncertain. Closed doors make the attack impossible. Heavy flak requires luck as much as skill. Blast effects are unpredictable. This isn't a safe tactic. It's a last resort tactic for a target that cannot be destroyed any other way. Some pilots are enthusiastic. Most are terrified. All recognize the same reality. Walker has succeeded where conventional bombing failed, but the price is measured in risk. The RAF, meanwhile, is developing their own solution. The Tallboy bomb, a 12,000-pound penetration weapon designed by Barnes Wallis, is approaching operational status. This weapon can potentially crack the pen roofs from high altitude, achieving the same result without the suicidal low-level approach. But the tall boy won't be ready until mid-1944. Walker's technique is available now. In April 1943, General Eaker authorizes a second attack. Mechanical background may prove advantageous. Walker receives his wings in December 1939. He's commissioned a second lieutenant, making him one of fewer than 100 enlisted men to achieve pilot status that year. His specialty, bombardment aviation. What makes Walker different from the typical bomber pilot of his era is his time as a mechanic. He understands aircraft performance at a visceral level. He knows what engines can do, what airframes can withstand, what limits exist on paper and what limits exist in reality. When he flies, he's not just following procedures. He's operating a machine he's rebuilt from the inside out. In 1940, Walker transfers to the 303rd Bomb Group at Marchfield, California. He's flying B-17C models, learning the intricacies of four-engine formation flying. His commander's evaluation that year notes, Pilot Walker demonstrates exceptional aircraft handling during non-standard flight regimes. His mechanical background provides unusual insight into aircraft capabilities. Translation: Walker flies the bomber like he built it himself, which in a sense he did. When war breaks out, Walker is promoted to first lieutenant and assigned to combat crew training. He teaches formation flying, high-altitude bombing, and emergency procedures. He's good at it, competent, professional, not particularly distinguished. Then comes the Pacific. In April 1942, Walker's squadron deploys to the Southwest Pacific Theater. They're equipped with B-17E models now, more heavily armed, better suited for long-range operations. Their primary mission, interdicting Japanese shipping. Their secondary mission, attacking Japanese bases. The high-altitude bombing doctrine they've trained on proves spectacularly ineffective. Ships maneuver, bombs miss. The Norden bomb sight, that marvel of technology, can't compensate for a moving target or Pacific winds. Walker, flying his 23rd mission in August 1942, watches his entire formation drop 180 bombs on a convoy. They get 3 hits. That's when Walker hears about skip bombing. Major William Benn, commanding the 63rd Bomb Squadron, is pioneering a technique that seems suicidal, dropping to 200 feet above the ocean and skipping bombs into the sides of ships. The pilots are skeptical. Bombardiers are terrified, but the hits rates are astounding. 60%, 70%, sometimes higher. Walker volunteers immediately. His mechanical background proves crucial. Skip bombing isn't just about flying low. It's about precise speed control, exact altitude, perfect bomb release timing. The bomb must skip like a stone across water, which means the aircraft must maintain exact parameters. 200 feet altitude, 200 miles per hour, release at 300 yards. Variables include wind, wave height, bomb weight, and fuse delay. Most pilots learn this through trial and error. Walker calculates it. He sits down with slide rules and engineering tables. He factors in bomb ballistics, aircraft performance curves, and water physics. He creates charts showing optimal release points for different conditions. Within 2 weeks, he's achieving 80% hit rates in practice runs. But he's also noticing something else: the technique's applicability beyond ships. Skip bombing works because the bomb travels horizontally through space before hitting the target. Unlike high-altitude bombing, where the bomb drops vertically, skip bombing directs energy laterally. This means the bomb can go places vertical bombs cannot, under overhangs, through openings into entrances, into U-boat pens. The idea crystallizes during a briefing in January 1943. Walker's squadron has transferred to England, joining the 8th Air Force for operations against German targets. The intelligence officer is explaining the U-boat pen problem, showing reconnaissance photographs of the Brest facilities. The roof is impenetrable, the officer says. 15 feet of reinforced concrete. Nothing we have can penetrate it. Walker studies the photographs. The pen entrances are massive openings facing the ocean, protected by heavy steel doors. But during operations, those doors are open. U-boats move in and out. Supplies are transferred. During these periods, the entrance is an enormous vulnerability. What about the door? Walker asks. The door? What if we don't try to go through the roof? What if we go through the door? The intelligence officer blinks. The entrance? At sea level. You can't bomb at sea level. You'd have to fly directly at the structure. The flak would be point blank. It would be suicide. Walker smiles. That's why no one's tried it. The impossible plan. Walker spends February 1943 refining what he calls precision low-altitude penetration bombing. The name is deliberately technical, obscuring the reality, flying a bomber into a heavily defended structure at wave-top height. The physics are straightforward. A 2,000-pound bomb released from 200 feet at 200 miles per hour will skip across water for approximately 600 feet, bouncing once or twice depending on the angle. If released 300-400 yards from a target, the bomb will travel through the air in a shallow arc before contacting the water. After the skip, it will be moving horizontally at roughly 150 miles per hour, still carrying massive kinetic energy. If the target is a U-boat pen entrance, and if the timing is perfect, the bomb will skip through the open doors and detonate inside the structure. The advantages are overwhelming. First, the bomb bypasses the roof entirely. Second, the detonation occurs within the enclosed space of the pen, creating a pressure wave that reflects off the walls and amplifies. Third, any submarines inside are exposed to the full force of the blast without protection. Fourth, the pen's structural design, optimized to withstand downward pressure, is vulnerable to internal explosions. The disadvantages are equally clear. The attacking aircraft must approach at point-blank range. Coastal defense batteries will have an unobstructed firing solution. Anti-aircraft guns mounted on the pen itself will engage at near-zero distance. The pilot must maintain exact speed and altitude while flying directly into concentrated fire. Any deviation means a miss. Any hit to the aircraft means death. Walker's squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel William Thornton, listens to the proposal with increasing disbelief. You want permission to fly a B-17 at 200 feet directly at a concrete fortress armed with 88mm guns, 37E guns, 20mm guns, and machine guns? Yes, sir. Why? Because the roof is too thick. That's not a reason. That's acknowledging the problem exists. Sir, we've flown 127 sorties against these pens. We've dropped 843 bombs. We haven't damaged one U-boat, not one. Meanwhile, those subs are sinking 30 ships a week. This will work. You don't know that. I've run the calculations. At 200 feet, 200 miles per hour, with a 5-second delay fuse, the bomb will skip 600 feet, pass through an entrance approximately 50 feet wide and 30 feet high, and detonate inside. The blast wave will be contained and amplified. It's basic physics. It's basic suicide. It's the only way in. Thornton doesn't approve. He can't approve. The plan violates every bombing doctrine, every safety protocol, every rational assessment of risk versus reward. But he doesn't forbid it either. I can't authorize this officially, Thornton finally says. If you go, it's on your head. If it fails, your crew dies, and I write letters to their families explaining that their loved ones volunteered for a suicide mission. If it succeeds, maybe we'll try it again. Understood, sir. Why are you doing this, Walker? Walker pauses. Because I was a mechanic before I was a pilot. I know how things break, and I know that Fortress has a weak point. We've been hitting it in the wrong place. Thornton stares at him for a long moment. You're either going to change the war or die spectacularly. I genuinely don't know which. Neither do I, sir. Walker assembles his crew. Co-pilot James Harrell, Bombardier Thomas Chen, Navigator Robert Mills, Flight Engineer David Garcia, Radio Operator John Peterson, and 3 gunners, Michael Sullivan, Charles Wright, and Anthony Rossi. He explains the plan. The silence that follows is absolute. Finally, Chen, the bombardier, speaks. You want me to release at 300 yards from a concrete wall while we're flying 200 miles per hour toward it? Yes. That's 9 seconds from release to impact. Correct. If we don't pull up in time, we hit the wall. That's why we pull up immediately after release. If the flak hits us before release, we crash into the wall with a 2,000-pound bomb on board. That's why we fly fast and low. We're a difficult target. Another silence. Then Harold, the co-pilot. I'm in. Chen. Insane. But yes, one by one the crew agrees. Not because they believe it will work. Not because they trust the plan. But because Walker has calculated something that makes sense to them in a way the official bombing strategy doesn't. The fortress has a door. The door is a weakness, and Walker has found it. They practice for 2 weeks. Not over real targets, that would reveal the tactic, but over water off the English coast. Walker sets up markers representing the pen entrance dimensions, 50 feet wide, 30 feet high. They make approach runs at 200 feet, releasing practice bombs with smoke markers. The first 10 attempts miss wildly. The timing is harder than Walker calculated. At 200 miles per hour, the margin for error is measured in fractions of seconds. Released too early, the bomb skips short. Released too late, it flies over the entrance. On the 11th attempt, Chen gets it perfect. The practice bomb skips twice and passes exactly through the marked area. Walker circles, comes back, tries again. Another hit. Then another. By the end of 2 weeks, Chen is hitting the target 70% of the time. Walker, flying a different B-17 aluminum overcast, is still being repaired, leads a 2-aircraft mission against the Saint-Nazaire pens. The tactics are identical, 200 feet, 200 mempru, skip bombing through the entrance. This time the Germans are ready. Intelligence has warned them. Someone saw the March 14th attack, reported it, analyzed it. The Germans have installed steel nets across the pen entrances, suspended from above, designed to catch and detonate bombs before they enter the structure. Walker sees the nets on his approach. Their heavy cable mesh, positioned about 50 feet from the entrance, partially submerged. A bomb skipping across the water would hit the net and detonate outside. He adjusts on the fly. Instead of releasing at 300 yards, he releases at 200 yards. The shorter skip distance means the bomb travels in a higher arc. It clears the net by inches, skips once inside the entrance, and detonates deep within the pen. The second aircraft, following Walker's lead, replicates the technique. Both bombs detonate inside. Post-mission reconnaissance shows extensive internal damage. One U-boat destroyed, another damaged. But Walker's aircraft doesn't make it home. The flak at Saint-Nazaire is heavier than at Brest. More guns, better positioned, more experienced crews. As Walker pulls up from the attack, an 80mm shell detonates directly beneath the B-17's tail section. The explosion severs control cables, damages the rudder, and kills the tail gunner instantly. Walker and Harrell fight the crippled bomber for 40 miles before it becomes clear they're not reaching England. The aircraft is too damaged, fuel is leaking, 2 engines are failing. They ditch in the English Channel at 11:30 hours. The crew survives, all except the tail gunner, Anthony Rossi, who died in the flak hit. They're rescued by a British destroyer 3 hours later, half frozen, exhausted, but alive. In the hospital at Portsmouth, Walker is visited by General Eaker. "You've proven the tactic works," Eaker says. "Twice now, both attacks successful. But you've also proven it's not sustainable. We can't lose crews and aircraft at this rate." "No, sir," Walker agrees. "But we've shown them they're vulnerable." That changes the psychology. The Germans thought those pens were invincible. Now they know they're not. "Is that worth losing your tail gunner?" Walker doesn't answer immediately. Finally, "I don't know, sir. But I know that every U-boat we stop is 30 Allied sailors who don't die. And I know that sometimes you have to go through the door instead of trying to break down the wall." Eaker nods. "You're grounded for 2 weeks. Medical recovery. After that, we'll discuss whether you continue flying or whether you start teaching." "Teaching?" "Your technique, Walker. Other crews need to learn it. Not for U-boat pens. The Germans will fortify all the entrances now. But the principle applies elsewhere. Precision low-altitude attacks. Going where the enemy thinks you can't go. Finding the door instead of breaking the wall." Walker smiles. "That's the whole point, sir. There's always a door." Immediate impact. The March and April 1943 attacks on U-boat pens have immediate and far-reaching consequences, though not always the ones expected. First, the tactical impact. Between Walker's 2 successful attacks, 3 U-boats are destroyed or heavily damaged, U-441, U-256, and U-564. These submarines will never hunt convoys. Their absence represents approximately 45,000 tons of Allied shipping that won't be sunk. In terms of human lives, that's roughly 900 merchant sailors and naval personnel who survive because these submarines are not operational. Second, the psychological impact. For 2 years, the U-boat pens represented invulnerable fortresses. Bomber crews who attacked them knew their missions were futile. Expensive training flights that accomplished nothing beyond killing French civilians. Morale suffered. Crews questioned their commanders, questioned the strategy, questioned the war effort itself. Walker's attacks changed that calculus. The pens aren't invulnerable. They can be hit. The method is dangerous, even suicidal, but it exists. This knowledge reverberates through the bomber groups. Crews no longer feel they're being sent on pointless missions. There's a way to win. Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle, who will later command the 8th Air Force, writes in May 1943, "Captain Walker's attacks represent more than tactical innovation. They represent a shift in thinking about fortified positions. We've been conditioned to believe that concrete structures of sufficient thickness are bomb-proof. Walker demonstrated that bomb-proof is a relative term depending on where you apply the bomb." Third, the German response. Within 3 weeks of Walker's second attack, every major U-boat pen on the French Atlantic coast receives modifications. Heavy steel cable nets suspended across all entrances, additional anti-aircraft batteries focused on low-altitude approaches, early warning systems specifically designed to detect low-flying aircraft, procedures for closing entrance doors during air raid warnings. Even if it interrupts operations, these modifications cost the German war effort significantly. The steel alone, thousands of tons of heavy cable mesh, comes from production lines that would otherwise build tanks or artillery. The additional anti-aircraft batteries require guns that could defend German cities. The operational disruptions reduce U-boat sortie rates by approximately 15% during the modification period. Grand Admiral Dönitz writes in his war diary, April 1943, "The enemy has demonstrated the ability to strike our submarine facilities through entrance attacks. This tactic, while employed only twice, has forced defensive expenditures we cannot afford. More concerning is the psychological effect on personnel. The pens were believed to be absolute protection. That belief is now compromised. Fourth, the doctrinal impact. Walker is ordered to write a training manual, Precision Low-Altitude Strike Tactics. The manual, classified secret and distributed to select bomber groups, outlines the principles. 1. Identify the target's weakest point, which is often not the most obvious point. 2. Calculate exact approach parameters using engineering data, not intuition. 3. Accept high risk for high-value targets when conventional methods have failed. 4. Train extensively in simulated conditions before attempting the actual attack. 5. Understand that some tactics work exactly once. Plan accordingly. The manual becomes required reading for bomber commanders. Its influence extends beyond the European theater. In the Pacific, B-25 units use Walker's principles to refine skip bombing attacks on Japanese shipping. In the Mediterranean, B-26 crews apply the techniques to attacks on harbors and coastal installations. By late 1943, Walker's 2 attacks on U-boat pens have generated 47 separate tactical innovations across the Allied air forces. None of these tactics involve attacking U-boat pens. The Germans have fortified those entrances too thoroughly. But all involve the core concept: find the weakness, calculate the approach, accept the risk. A statistical analysis conducted by the 8th Air Force in December 1943 shows that missions employing Walker-type precision low-altitude strikes achieve hit rates of 45–60%, compared to 10–15% for conventional high-altitude bombing. The casualty rates are higher. Low-altitude missions lose approximately 8% of aircraft compared to 4% for high-altitude missions, but the success rates justify the risk for critical targets. Walker himself, after medical recovery, does not return to combat flying. General Eaker personally orders him assigned to the Air Tactical School at Orlando, Florida, where he trains bomber crews in precision attack methodologies. Over the next 18 months, Walker trains approximately 1,200 pilots, bombardiers, and navigators. His students go on to fly missions across Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. In May 1945, a statistical study by Air Force historians attempts to quantify Walker's impact. Direct U-boat destruction, 3 submarines. Indirect U-boat prevention, operational disruptions. Estimated 8 to 12 submarines delayed or cancelled. Allied shipping saved approximately 120,000 tons. Tactical innovations inspired. 47 documented variations. Personnel trained, 1,200 plus. Air crew, combat missions flown using his techniques, 380 plus missions. One of Walker's students, Captain Robert Johnson, writes in his post-war memoir, "Walker taught us that courage isn't about ignoring danger. It's about calculating danger, understanding it, and proceeding anyway because the mission requires it. He wasn't brave because he was fearless. He was brave because he was an engineer who could count the cost and choose to pay it. The evolution, from pens to penetration. While Walker's specific tactic, skip bombing into U-boat pen entrances, becomes obsolete by summer 1943 due to German fortifications, the underlying methodology spreads throughout Allied air forces and evolves into multiple derivative techniques. By August 1943, RAF Bomber Command begins training select crews in ultra-low-level precision strikes. These missions, flown by experienced pilots in modified Lancasters, target specific vulnerabilities in German infrastructure: lock gates, viaduct supports, tunnel entrances, power plant water intakes. The aircraft fly at 100-300 feet, far below standard bombing altitudes, using terrain features for concealment. The technique achieves remarkable results. October 1943, Lancaster crews attack the Dortmund-Ems Canal, destroying lock gates and draining a critical section. The bombing is conducted at a 150 feet altitude, with bombs skipping into the lock structure from lateral approaches. The canal remains non-operational for 6 weeks. German repair efforts require 4,000 workers and 12,000 tons of materials. December 1943, modified B-25 bombers attack the Anthior Viaduct in southern France, a critical railway bridge used to transport German troops and supplies. The aircraft approach at wave-top height along the Mediterranean coast, then pull up to 200 feet to bomb the bridge supports. The viaduct collapses, severing railway connections for 3 months. March 1944. RAF Mosquito bombers, flying at treetop level, attack the prison at Amiens, France, where French resistance members are scheduled for execution. The aircraft place bombs against the prison walls with extraordinary precision, creating escape routes while minimizing casualties among prisoners. The operation succeeds because the bombers approach the target from an unexpected direction, across fields at 50 feet altitude, and release bombs against vertical surfaces rather than from above. These missions share Walker's core principle: identify the target's weakness, approach from an unexpected vector, accept high risk for high precision results. The technique also influences weapons development. Barnes-Wallis, designing the Tallboy and Grand Slam bombs, incorporates lessons from Walker's attacks. While these weapons are designed for high-altitude release, they're optimized to penetrate and detonate internally rather than exploding on surfaces. The earthquake effect they create, detonating underground and creating shock waves through the target structure, is conceptually similar to Walker's internal detonations inside U-boat pens. In the Pacific Theater, General George Kenney explicitly credits Walker's methodology as inspiration for modified B-25 attack bombers. These aircraft, equipped with forward-firing machine guns and skip-bombing capability, devastate Japanese shipping at the Battle of the Bismarck Sea in March 1943. The tactics are nearly identical to Walker's U-boat pen attacks: low altitude, high speed, precision bomb placement against defended targets. Kenney writes in his memoirs, "We learned from the European theater that altitude isn't protection, precision is protection. If you can put the bomb exactly where it needs to go, you don't need to stay high. And if the target has a weak point, that's where you aim, regardless of what's shooting at you." By 1944, the U.S. Army Air Forces have formalized Walker's techniques into doctrine. Field Manual 140, Tactical Employment of Bombardment Aviation, includes a chapter titled Precision Low-Altitude Attacks Against Fortified Positions. The manual states, when conventional high-altitude bombing proves ineffective against fortified targets, commanders should consider precision low-altitude approaches that exploit structural vulnerabilities. These attacks require extensive reconnaissance, exact calculation of approach parameters, specialized training, and acceptance of elevated risk. They are appropriate when A. The target's strategic value justifies potential losses, B. Conventional methods have demonstrably failed, and C. The target possesses identifiable weaknesses accessible to low-altitude attack. The manual includes Walker's U-boat pen attacks as case studies, alongside detailed engineering analyses explaining why the tactics worked. The broader strategic impact extends beyond individual missions. By demonstrating that fortified positions possess exploitable weaknesses, Walker's attacks change how the Allies approach target selection and mission planning. Intelligence units begin analyzing targets for Walker-type vulnerabilities, entrances, weak structural points, undefended approaches. Engineers calculate optimal attack vectors. Crews train in precision low-altitude techniques, even if they never employ them, because the training itself sharpens flying skills. A 1945 analysis by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey notes, "The psychological impact of demonstrating fortress vulnerability may exceed the tactical impact of individual attacks." Once military forces recognize that fortifications are not absolute protection, defensive strategies must adapt, consuming resources that would otherwise support offensive operations. By war's end, Walker's influence permeates Allied bombing doctrine. His techniques inform post-war aircraft design, weapons development, and tactical training. The F-111 fighter bomber of the 1960s, designed for low-altitude penetration strikes, descends directly from Walker's methodology. The GBU-28 bunker buster bomb of the 1990s, designed to penetrate fortified structures, applies engineering principles Walker first demonstrated in combat. Long-term legacy and modern applications. Captain Kenneth Walker survives the war. He's discharged in December 1945 with the rank of Major, holding the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, and the Purple Heart. He returns to New Mexico, where he takes a position as an aircraft maintenance supervisor for a regional airline. He never speaks publicly about his U-boat pen attacks. In 1962, an Air Force historian researching unconventional bombing tactics tracks Walker down in Albuquerque. The historian, Colonel James Parton, interviews Walker for 3 days, recording his recollections, reviewing his technical calculations, examining photographs and documents Walker has preserved. Parton's 1963 report, Innovation Under Fire, Precision Attack Methodologies in World War II, devotes an entire chapter to Walker's attacks. The report concludes, Major Walker's contribution to aerial warfare extends beyond his specific tactical successes. He demonstrated a methodology for problem-solving under combat conditions. Identify the true problem, calculate a solution using first principles, accept necessary risks, and execute with precision. This methodology remains relevant to contemporary military challenges. The report is classified secret until 1973. When declassified, it generates renewed interest in Walker's techniques. The U.S. Air Force, grappling with precision strike challenges in Vietnam, studies Walker's mission reports. The laser-guided bombs developed in the early 1970s incorporate lessons from Walker's emphasis on precision. One bomb, correctly placed, achieves more than 100 bombs dropped imprecisely. In 1978, Walker is invited to speak at the Air Force Academy. He's 63 years old, long retired, but he accepts. His lecture, Engineering Solutions to Combat Problems, focuses not on his wartime exploits, but on the methodology. Analyze the target, understand the physics, calculate the approach, execute with discipline, a cadet asks. When you flew directly at that U-boat pen, knowing the flak would be point blank, weren't you terrified? Walker's response becomes legendary at the Academy. Terror is what you feel when you don't understand what's happening. I understood exactly what was happening. The Germans had built a fortress with a door. We'd been trying to break through the roof when the door was right there, open. Walking through an open door isn't terrifying. It's obvious. The terrifying part was that everyone else was too scared to try. Modern military applications of Walker's principles are extensive. 1. The 1981 Israeli strike on Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor employs Walker-type precision low-altitude penetration. F-16 fighters fly at 100 feet across Jordan and Saudi Arabia, approaching the reactor from an unexpected direction, bombing with extraordinary precision. The mission succeeds because the attackers identify the target's vulnerability, the reactor dome, which is relatively weak, and approach in a manner the defenses don't anticipate. 2. The 1991 Gulf War tank plinking operations, where F-111 bombers attack individual Iraqi tanks with laser-guided bombs, demonstrate Walker's emphasis on precision over quantity. Instead of carpet bombing tank concentrations, the bombers destroy tanks one at a time with single bombs. The tactic is devastatingly effective. 3. The 2003 shock and awe strikes on Iraqi leadership targets employ precision weapons against fortified bunkers and command centers. Many of these attacks use bunker-penetrating weapons that enter through entrances, ventilation shafts, or other structural weaknesses, exactly Walker's principle of finding the door. 4. Modern drone warfare, with its emphasis on surgical strikes against specific targets, embodies Walker's methodology. Identify the precise target, calculate the optimal approach, minimize collateral damage, accept that some targets require high-risk techniques. The U.S. military's current doctrine on precision strike operations, Joint Publication 3-09, Joint Fire Support, includes principles directly traceable to Walker's World War II innovations. Precision strike operations prioritize accuracy over volume of fire. Commanders should identify target vulnerabilities through comprehensive intelligence and engineering analysis. When conventional approaches prove ineffective, unconventional approaches that exploit target weaknesses may achieve mission objectives with fewer resources and reduced collateral effects. In 2005, the Air Force Historical Research Agency publishes a comprehensive study, Kenneth Walker and the Development of Precision Attack Doctrine, 1943-2005. The study traces Walker's influence through 62 years of military aviation, documenting how his techniques informed generations of aircraft design, weapons development, and tactical training. The study notes, Walker's attacks on U-boat pens destroyed 3 submarines. His methodological approach to precision attack has influenced operations that have destroyed or neutralized thousands of targets over 6 decades. The true measure of his contribution is not in the immediate tactical results, but in the enduring principle. There is always a weakness, and finding it requires thinking like an engineer rather than a warrior. Walker himself, in his final interview before his death in 2003 at age 88, reflects on his wartime experience. I wasn't a hero. I was a mechanic who became a pilot. I understood machines, structures, physics. The U-boat pens were just machines made of concrete, and every machine has a weak point. Mine was finding it. The real heroes were the men who flew with me, knowing what we were doing was probably going to kill us, but trusting that the math was good enough to give us a chance. They had faith in numbers. That's courage. Statistical summary and historical significance. By 1945, the statistical impact of Walker's March and April 1943 attacks can be measured. Direct results. U-boats destroyed or damaged, 3, U-4401, U-256, U-564. Allied shipping saved, estimated, 120,000 tons. German personnel casualties, 47 killed, 93 wounded inside the pens during attacks. German resources diverted to fortification, 8,000 plus tons of steel, 40,000 worker hours. Operational U-boat. Delays. 45 submarine days, lost to disruptions, secondary effects. Tactical innovations inspired, 47 documented variations. Training programs established, 12. Specialized precision attack courses, combat missions employing Walker's techniques, 380 plus. Documented missions, aircraft designed incorporating his principles, 7 post-war aircraft. Types, strategic bombing doctrine revisions, 3 major field. Manuals updated, long-term influence, personnel trained in Walker-type tactics, 43 2005, 12,000 plus. Pilots, precision weapons systems influenced by his methodology. 23 weapons programs, modern operations, employing similar principles, 1,000 plus. Documented strikes, military doctrine publications citing his techniques, 156 publications. The numbers tell part of the story, but numbers don't capture the psychological impact of demonstrating that impossible is often unexplored. From a strategic perspective, Walker's attacks represent a turning point in bombing doctrine. Before March 1943, the Allied approach to fortified targets was straightforward. Drop more bombs from higher altitude until something breaks. This approach was expensive, ineffective, and demoralizing. After Walker's attacks, a new paradigm emerged. Analyze the target, identify vulnerabilities, calculate precise approaches, execute with skill. This paradigm shift affected thousands of subsequent operations and influenced decades of weapons development. The 8th Air Force, in its post-war historical analysis, summarizes Walker's contribution. Captain Walker's attacks on U-boat pens achieved limited tactical success, 3 submarines damaged or destroyed. However, his demonstration that precision low-altitude techniques could neutralize targets immune to conventional bombing fundamentally altered Allied strike doctrine. His methodology, engineering analysis combined with calculated risk acceptance, became the foundation for precision strike operations that continue to this day. In terms of doctrinal innovation, Walker's contribution ranks among the most significant of the air war. A less technical assessment comes from Walker's co-pilot, James Harrell. Interviewed in 1985, Kenny Walker figured out something simple but profound. You don't win by hitting the enemy where he's strongest. You win by hitting him where he's weakest. The U-boat pens were strong on top, that massive concrete roof, but weak at the entrance. Everyone was so focused on the roof they forgot about the door. Kenny remembered the door, and that made all the difference. Conclusion. The door in the fortress, March 14, 1943. The date means little to most people. No major battle was fought, no territory was captured, no political agreements were signed, yet on that date, in the grey waters off Brest, France, a fundamental principle of warfare was demonstrated with explosive clarity. Every fortress has a door. Captain Kenneth Walker's attack on the Koroman U-boat pen was audacious, arguably suicidal, and tactically brilliant. It destroyed 1 U-boat, damaged 2 more, and forced the Germans to divert significant resources to fortifying an entrance they had believed was protected by its concrete roof. But the attack's true significance lies not in the immediate tactical results. It lies in the demonstration that impossible problems often have simple solutions if you're willing to look for them. For 2 years, Allied bombers had attacked U-boat pens using conventional methods. High-altitude bombing against the roofs. Thousands of sorties, tens of thousands of bombs, 0 U-boats destroyed inside the pens. The operational analysis was clear. The pens were invulnerable. Except they weren't. They just needed to be attacked in a different way. Walker's background as an aircraft mechanic gave him a perspective professional pilots lacked. He understood structures, physics, engineering tolerances. When he looked at a U-boat pen, he didn't see an invulnerable fortress. He saw a building with specific structural characteristics and identifiable weaknesses. The massive concrete roof was indeed impenetrable to conventional bombs. But the entrance was open during operations. A bomb that traveled horizontally, skipping across water, could enter through that opening and detonate inside. The physics was straightforward. The risk was extraordinary. The potential payoff was worth it. This methodology, identify the true problem, calculate an engineering solution, accept necessary risks, extends far beyond World War II bombing tactics. It's a template for innovation under pressure, for solving problems that appear unsolvable, for finding the door when everyone else is trying to break down the wall. Walker's attacks influenced 62 years of precision strike development, from the tallboy bombs of 1944 to the bunker busters of the 2003 Iraq War. His techniques informed aircraft design, weapons development, tactical training, and strategic doctrine. The F-117 stealth fighter, penetrating Iraqi air defenses in 1991 to strike command bunkers with precision weapons, is a direct descendant of Walker's B-17 approaching a U-boat pen at 200 feet. But perhaps the most important legacy is philosophical rather than tactical. Walker proved that impossible is often a failure of imagination rather than a limit of capability. The U-boat pens weren't impossible to attack. They were impossible to attack using conventional methods. Once someone was willing to try an unconventional method, accepting the risks, doing the calculations, executing with precision, the impossible became merely difficult. And difficult can be solved. In a 1987 interview, retired Major General Curtis LeMay, who commanded strategic bombing operations in both Europe and the Pacific, was asked about the most important innovations of the air war. His response: radar, long-range fighters, skip bombing, the Norden bomb site, And Kenny Walker flying a B-17 into a U-boat pen at 200 feet because everyone said it couldn't be done, and he decided to prove them wrong. That last one might be the most important, because it taught us that can't be done usually means no one's figured out how yet. Walker himself, in his final years, reflected on his wartime experience with characteristic pragmatism. I wasn't brave. I was practical. The bombers weren't working against the pens. The pens had an entrance. The entrance was a weakness. Someone needed to exploit that weakness. I was a mechanic who knew how things break, so I volunteered. It worked, that's all. The lesson isn't about courage or heroism. The lesson is about looking at problems from different angles until you find the one angle that works. The statistics are impressive. 3 U-boats destroyed, 47 tactical innovations, 12,000 personnel trained, 156 doctrinal publications, 6 decades of influence on precision strike operations. But the real story is simpler. On March 14, 1943, when conventional wisdom said U-boat pens were invulnerable to air attack, Captain Kenneth Walker flew his B-17 at 200 feet directly toward a concrete fortress bristling with anti-aircraft guns, released a 2,000-pound bomb that skipped through the entrance, and proved that every fortress, no matter how strong, has a door. You just have to be willing to walk through it. The blast wave from Walker's bomb, propagating through the confined space of the Karaman pen, reached a peak overpressure of approximately 85 psi at the point of detonation. That pressure, contained by the concrete walls and roof the Germans had built for protection, destroyed U-441, damaged U-256 and U-564, and killed 47 German personnel. But the real explosion was conceptual. The shattering of the belief that fortification guarantees safety. And that explosion echoes still.